Okay, so for those of you who are new, welcome. My name is Richard. Just to give you some background about this forum. So this forum just isn't intended as a platform to share ideas for inspiration and to help other people. And what we do is we just share success stories from other small businesses. So if you have any suggestions or comments and whatnot, please feel free to contact me. Okay, our agenda for today, I'm going to go through basic housekeeping. We'll do a quick recap of what we did last week, just 10 seconds or so of it. Then I'm going to hand over to Alani, and she's going to talk and introduce the topic called Chasing the Juice. Very cryptic and interesting this week. Then we'll open it up for questions, and then we'll wrap it up. So just some quick housekeeping rules. Please just keep your microphones muted. You can introduce your company or yourselves via the chat function if you so wish. And then if you've got any questions during the interview, then just raise them in the chat function, and then we can stop and ask your question, or you can just hold it until we get to the Q&A section. Okay, so last week, we had the Honorable Mr. Henro Kruger, who's the Shadow Minister for Small Business, and he shared with us all the different programs and relief programs that government has to support small business. And in the meantime, he sent me a new act, the new Small Business Act, and I'm busy going through it. And it looks very, very interesting. So I'm going to invite him back in a few weeks' time and to share with you guys what's in the new Business Act and when we can expect this act to be passed through Parliament. Okay, so today's chat is all about chasing the juice. And I'm going to hand over to Lalani now and ask her to tell us what it's all about and what's the title and what does it mean.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Well, when Kauai, I know Kauai from getting my juice there at the gym, and when we asked Wendy and Hendrik to come and talk to us, I just went in and just had a little bit of a look at where did it actually start. And so chasing the juice comes from the guys that started us, was actually chasing the waves on an island in Hawaii, and then they sort of indulged in all the nice fresh fruit and made juices of it and started a juice bar there. Then in, I think, 1996, they came to a wedding in Cape Town, and afterwards on a surfing holiday, and then they realized that their normal healthy food and drinks was not readily available. And they actually started the Kauai franchise. It started very small in Cape Town, I think 3, for a few years it was just 3, and today there's quite a few of these franchises going. So we asked Wendy and Hendrik, who are franchise owners, to please come and chat to us and tell us how they experience the Kauai franchise. Now, Wendy and Hendrik's been going for some time. Hendrik's been on the corporate side, the franchise law side, if I'm right, for 18 years. If you go into his LinkedIn page, you'll see that he's got quite a lot of experience with franchising. And Wendy for 12 years. Between the two of them, they own 6 Kauai outlets. 3 of them is what Hendrik described as malls and high streets. They've got one in Stellenbosch, they've got one in the Somerset Mall and one in Cape Gate, and then they've got 3 what you call it on the move, which are actually situated in gyms, the Virgin Active gyms. Is that right, Hendrik?
In motion.
Oh, in motion, sorry. So let's sort of jump in and ask Hendrik, Wendy, what made you go down the franchise route with Kauai? What's your story?
Well, I'll kick off. I mean, I've been on the corporate side for many years. From FMCG days went on, and then I started McDonald's South Africa in 2002. So I learned from the guys that in our industry sets the pace literally in terms of how you operate. So I really learned from the better guys in terms of operational side. And then moved on. We moved down to Cape Town and eventually ended up with Kauai on the financial side, FD, and then took over 2.5 years or 3 years later as the CEO, and then 5 years. And in that time, we settled in Stellenbosch side of things, and Wendy, after a year or so, was getting a bit bored, and that's where her entry into it started. You can talk them through.
Yeah, I think the first time, it was in 2008 that we had to rescue the Stellenbosch store. And yeah, and that's where it started. And it started off with having to train all day long, because you've got to go through the process. Obviously, if you want a franchise, you've got to go through the training. So yeah, that's where it started in 2008, and yeah, we're still going in 2020.
Yeah, I mean, she alluded, the Stellenbosch store was opened late in 2006, different franchisee, and then a year and a bit later, he ground the cash flow gears to a halt, and corporate side, we had to rescue it. And it was one of those stores that long-term will be successful, but however, it needed somebody that will put that in, and also not necessarily having to take home money for the first 6 or so months of turning it around. And that's, we didn't really want it on the corporate side, and that's where the opportunity came. And I said to Wendy, and she took 2 weeks to walk herself through the decision. And once she was on board, that's where it all started. So yeah, I mean, food industry more than 20 years, so it's kind of a natural fit in terms of what we knew. Also, Kauai was probably in the food industry side of things, it's where the future growth was going to come from. The American brands and all of them were already in South Africa, and the proliferation of brands was happening, and it's the growth, future growth was really going to be in more the healthy food side of things, as the consumer needs change, and that's why it was an easy fit for us. Food game that we know, the future growth, where it's going to come from, and then obviously, yeah, from there we've just well, let's put it this way: my wife Wendy grew it for the first 10 years, and I joined. It was so successful that I decided eventually to also leave corporate life, and buy into the lifestyle and grow it a bit further now. Since I've joined, we've added 2 more stores. We bought Somerset from a previous franchisee, and then we opened Cape Gate last year. So, yeah.
Well, that brings me to my next question, Hendrik. How do you go about financing a franchise? It sounds very exciting, but where do, if you want to open one, where do you go for money?
Yeah, it's always difficult with as we heard 2-3 coffee chats ago, what the banking guys look for. You obviously would need some of your own capital first. Most of the franchise groups will not take you on board with for the first store initially, definitely 50% of the equity, and it's just to make the business model and the risk of running it work, instead of maybe grinding the cash flow gears to a halt. So that's why it's important that roughly yardstick that they all look at, it's that 50% mark. For us, it was Stellenbosch was a rescue, so we didn't necessarily bring 50% to the table, but there was a IDC loan at preferential terms on that store, and we just took it over from there. And then from there, our own capital, and then combination with the banks to get funding. normally through either FAST or franchise industry or the brand itself, they will have links to the banks, certainly the big four, because all of them have franchising divisions. And they'll obviously, if the franchisor brand is a strong brand, the banks will kind of lean over backwards to fund those type of franchisees. So yeah, for us, Somerset was a reasonable priced buy, which we then we had capital, so we bought that. But Cape Gate was half own funds, half banking funds, and the banking funds was really asset-based finance. Mostly when you open a new store, at least half, well, all the assets are actually brand new, but a lot of them have as equipment with serial numbers and things like that. So the banks will fund those. It's where they come to the shop fit and bricks and mortar that they're a little bit hesitant. And then obviously you need a little bit more money in terms of lease deposits and working capital, and certainly before you open a new store for a month in advance, you take on the staff and start training them. So you need to fund that as well in terms of paying them. So there's a bit of working capital and lease deposit required as well. So that kind of makes up the funds, but the banks do finance, particularly if it's the asset-based side of things.
That's really good to hear. Now, can you, the two of you, please tell us what are the challenges that you faced? We know about the challenges now, but when you started up, what was the challenges and how are you sort of handling it now?
Okay, so when I started initially when we had to take over the store, I still had to do my training, which was at head office, which was in Cape Town. So every morning you'd get in your car, drive, fight the traffic, go to Cape Town, do your training, and then afterwards then come back to Stellenbosch and see what's happening at the actual store. And yeah, and we had to fire the manager within the first couple of weeks from taking over the store. So that was a bit of a good start, getting rid of the bad ones. But yeah, it was long days training and having to look at your store, working the weekend. So that was a big challenge. But yeah, I think for now, looking back, it's mostly the biggest challenge. I think is handling the staff. I think that's people. You depend on people, and you cannot be in your store 24 hours a day. So yeah, you depend on staff, and every now and again you have your hiccups with them. Yeah, and you can talk about COVID-19.
Yeah, I mean, we call it the daily grind. I mean, that's the one thing in the food industry, is that you're gonna have to get a team built up, teach them, and then trust them to an extent, and hold them accountable. But there is that daily grind that eventually catches up if you're not going to grow a thick skin, literally. Because anything goes, and stupidity sometimes comes through. Yeah, I mean, lately, obviously, the last 2 years pre-March was a good ride. Our industry grew quite nicely. Kauai, the brand itself, after rebranding about 3 years ago, also started to bear the fruits of that rebrand. So the business was growing quite nicely, and then COVID happened, which brought its challenges. As every day went by, you learned new things about COVID, and try and filter that through a little crystal ball to figure out what's going to happen in the future. So yeah, initially for us, the first 4 weeks was probably just trying to decipher all the facts from the fiction and figure out where is it going to go, and then also as I call it, the cash flow monster. Because suddenly you had no income coming in the till, and you've still got 2 months of creditors, suppliers to pay eventually. And then obviously your staff and landlords and things like that. So it's working through all of that and just making sure that the business will be around 6 to 12 months from now. Because, I mean, we currently employ 69 people. So there's a big responsibility of looking after them, because they in turn probably support at least 5 people. So it was really making sure that we will have a business in 6 months' time. And then once we learn more about COVID, and once we can see that, we can open doors again and the dust settles, is how do we build the business back up? Because it's not going to fall in our laps. That's the one thing we've learned. You're going to have to adapt, try new things as well. We can clearly see a shift to online purchasing, whether that's now delivery or even just ordering online, paying and collecting. So there's definitely going to be a shift from the sit-down scenario to the, let's call it, online convenience. And you've got to drive that and be at the forefront. I mean, we're fortunate with Kauai, the brand, that they have an app since May last year already, which does online ordering and paying, as well as the loyalty side of things. So it was quick and easy to just switch and push that, instead of having to create something before you can make use of it. Yeah, I mean, right now we've opened the doors 3 weeks ago. Delivery is only, which is roughly about 15% of sales. And it's only the 3 retail stores. The gyms, we don't know when they're going to open. And it's at least the last week we can now, since last Monday, we can have takeaways as well, which is added, we're probably up to nearly about 50% of the sales we did before COVID. So we're not going to retire early on that. It's a long way to go to build it back up, and that we can make sure that we can retire at some point of time in the future.
Well, I hope for your sake, and you can just go running. But Spain has posed a question here, sort of saying, how do you see the future of the franchise business in South Africa?
Well, I mean, it's the last 20 years, franchising has grown leaps and bounds. I mean, traditionally, it was linked to one or two industries only, particularly food was one of the earlier ones. But I mean, there's a lot of industries that have gone franchising over the last 20 years. I mean, you've got the health and beauty, nail bars and things. That sector has taken to franchising quite a bit as well. So there are certainly industries that have come on board in terms of franchising. So I think in South Africa, it will keep on. If you compare us to, first world countries like America, we're still far behind in terms of franchising. So there's ample room for growth, I think. And for, in my mind, I think franchising is one of the safer routes to grow or new entrepreneurs, because you get the support of a big brand behind you, and being taught the operational side, particularly procedures. A lot of it's procedure, and that's documented driven. So you get trained on that, given that, and that you can focus on doing it right, and some of the pains like supply chain and marketing and things are taken care of from the franchisor perspective, brand owner, so that you can focus on running a successful business or have multiple stores for that matter. So I believe franchising will grow in South Africa, and it is, instead of starting something from scratch yourself, it's certainly the safer route in. You own your own little business. So yeah, I mean, it's obviously South African context with BEE and things like that. For me, IDC got involved early 2000s with preferential funding for Black entrepreneurs. I know the late 2000s they stepped away from food industry a little bit, They did burn their fingers a little bit on some of those as well. But yeah, I mean, I think it's particularly if you want to grow a BE component, it's one of the safer routes to grow those type of entrepreneurs.
We've got a question that's sort of linked to this as well from Wendell. It says, what do you think will be the future mix between takeaways and online deliveries?
Yeah, I mean, it obviously depends on a brand. If you look at a Spur type group, which they majority sit down, you know, they would have had probably 10% maximum takeaway. So for them, their business model is predominantly sit down still, with table service. Whereas some of the other brands, like let's go to the other side of the spectrum, a KFC for argument's sake, you know, most of that is takeaways, and whether it's a combination of drive-through or buying at the counter and taking it away. So it depends on which brands and what your business model. For Kauai itself, I think we were roughly dependent on store location, probably about a 50-50 mix in terms of takeaway sit down, where you got stores located in a mall's food court, then you know you might have a little bit of sit down, depending on if you've got dedicated or communal seating, etc. So our store mix, you know, the two mall stores, they were probably a little bit more sit down than takeaway, probably a 60-40 split. And the future, I think it'll probably turn around the other way. It's going to be probably certainly the next year. I think a lot of people are going to be hesitant to use sit down due to still being cautious with the aftermath of COVID-19. So you're definitely your takeaway and delivery side of things and ordering is going to grow. We look at Stellenbosch with its location and probably limited seating. Takeaway was probably more. I would roughly say it was probably a 70-30 split. 70% being takeaway already. Now, out of that 70%, a good proportion was already delivery service through Mr. D and Uber as well. Stellenbosch somehow gravitated towards Uber, and I think it's got to do with a lot with the parking problem you have. That it's a lot more convenient to just order online, get it delivered, than trying to find parking and then pay for it, and then the time you spent in traffic. So I think that the traditional fast food guys, takeaway is going to grow away a little bit from the sit down, where you've still got a sit down table service model. You're going to have to adapt, otherwise you are probably going to suffer for a little while longer, other than that they can't open yet anyway.
Yeah, that's the other thing, that you really can't open for sit down. Yeah. Now, with all your experience, what advice would you give to somebody out there that wants to start or that are thinking of buying a franchise?
Yeah, I mean, do your homework properly. That's always the key. You know, from what do you gravitate towards? Because normally when you do something that you like, you'll be good at it. So look at it from that context, that which industry are you interested, and then you start exploring, you know, what brands are in that segments, and do the homework in terms of understanding those brands and how they operate, and then look at how they operate as a franchisee system. And that you glean from either online, or then once you've done the application, you have access to other franchisees that you can start talking to in terms of how do they find it, how have they experienced it, before you make a final decision. I think that's do your homework proper and understand that you're properly informed in terms of the good, the bad, and the ugly, because then you make an informed decision. There's always going to be issues and problems and things that you've got to deal with. And in any system, it's not always just rosy pictures. It's get all the issues and uglies out of it, understand it, because then you know what you're letting yourself in for. And then normally, I mean, in terms of joining a franchise system, part of the process is that the franchisor will put you through an application process where they learn of you as well. And that includes normally a half to a full day assessment in a store. So it cuts both ways, both in terms of you seeing and feeling it for a day, but also them seeing a bit of you and understanding how you think and operate and etc. You know, our game, the people issue is a big one. So if you get somebody that's probably going to be short on people skills, it's going to be a challenge. So you need to look for those good and bad up front, both from both sides of the spectrum in terms of the franchisee or the franchisor, that both can make an informed decision. You know, do you join the franchise club and the franchisor, you know, do you let the franchisee join the club? So that's critical. Do your homework proper, understand what you're going to let yourself in, and then go. You know, you gotta walk it through in terms of the whole process.
Okay. Well, I've got two questions here from the other people. Finished Bay wanted to ask again and said, the closure of the gyms, how did that affect you? And I think more or less, I'm curious that they say, okay, because nobody's going there, can you stop paying rent? Or what about your people there?
Yeah, I mean, we were obviously, all 6 were closed from 25, 27 March, and we opened 7th, 8th of May, the 3 retails. The gyms are still closed. The gym stores were effective leading up to the closure already, because there was already some form of social distancing being applied. And particularly the gyms, they were only allowing 100 people in it was 100, including staff, at any given time into the gym. So immediately there was limited amount of people in the gyms, and then there's obviously the fear factor already starting to grow amongst everybody, trying to avoid where there is a concentration of people. So we already saw, I mean, the gyms were operating at about probably a minus 2/3 of their sales for the last 10 days before closure. So, I mean, we were sending people on leave already, but it's pointless having, 5 or 6 people on a shift in the gym where 2 was suffice for the amount of sales that was happening. So that happened. Obviously, the business model with Virgin Active, it's a relationship spanning back from 2002 already. And the business model is pretty much, because it's a shared environment, there is a slight shared cost, particularly in terms of the investment. That Virgin does provide some of the shop fit, or certainly when it's a new gym built, they provide the shop fit side of where you come with the movable assets, if I can put it that, from the equipment to tables and chairs and things like that. And then obviously the relationship in terms of Virgin Active is the landlord from our perspective. They normally rent from another landlord anyway, but they sublet the space to the Kauai, and it's a pure turnover bond. So if you don't have any turnover, there is no rent. So, and that does, obviously it helps quite a bit now because we don't have to pay rent. But it helps also in the gym environment. We all know that mid-December, people stop going to gyms, and then they come back 15 January with a new vigor, etc. So there is a bit of a seasonality factor within the gym environment. Certain periods of the year is a lot more busier, and where other periods might be a little bit quiet. So it does assist you with that point of view in terms of running the business model and cash flow. So yeah, right now, we don't know when the gyms are going to open. I mean, there's been talk that Virgin is now also, like the tobacco guys, etc., might take the government on in court. Because obviously from there, it's now survival. The longer they wait, the less likely they are going to retain their full membership. Because a lot of people have now figured out that they can actually train outside of a Virgin Active successfully. So there is going to be a portion of people that's going to say, well, you know, I've got less money in the pocket. Let me rather stick to my new training regime rather than go back to gyms. And then obviously for the first couple of months after the gyms will open, there is going to be people still scared to go back to gyms in terms of concentration of people. So there's going to still be a long while, I think, before the gyms going to be back to the old access stats, which, you know, we need to feed through the door to get people that will buy Kauai eventually.
I see that Gareth is here posed a question. One said, how do you actually pronounce Kauai?
It's easy. If you can say Hawaii, like in Hawaii Islands, then you can say Kauai. Kauai is actually one of the islets in the Hawaiian archipelago. It's actually, as you alluded right at the beginning, that's where the surfer guys came and then eventually stayed in South Africa. And it was actually, its nickname is the Garden of Eden. And that's that freshness, healthy side of things where it comes from.
And I think you answered, Gareth. Are you okay that you actually, your relationship with the gym really is a beneficial one?
Yeah, I mean, over the years, I mean, and I go back to history, it's before my time, even on the corporate side. Kauai started with the Virgin Actives, and I think there was 2 or 3 of them initially, and they tried it and then opened a couple of more. And then after 2 years, there was actually a board meeting where they were contemplating to walk away from because they weren't making money off it. And luckily, stuck it out. I mean, because certainly in the last 10, 15 years of it, and certainly where you've got tougher economic times, the gym stores and model was actually the more profitable ones, particularly from a return on investment point of view. It's only now, probably the last 4 years, that the retail side have come back up. But the gyms, in terms of the business model and profitability, was certainly profitable. And it's that mutual relationship with Virgin where you're servicing the same member. And normally, even when Kauai has an issue, whether it's quality of food or whatever, or service, the staff attitude, you know, a lot of the complaints go via the Virgin Active route. They would complain in Virgin's ear instead of direct to Kauai sometimes. So it's you've got to have that symbiotic relationship where you keep the mutual member happy. Because the happiness leads to more sales for us, obviously, at the end of the day. So even if a whole membership in a gym is unhappy about the Virgin side, we suffer as well.
Just on that point as well, do you have the same relationship with the mall owners as well?
I mean, obviously, with the franchisor, they manage, certainly the bigger mall owners, they manage a lot of those relationships on an ongoing basis. But once a franchisee gets involved, then you know, it's the entry point and the negotiations, and so you rely a little bit on the franchisor initially. But over time, afterwards, you start building your relationship on a local mall level, because that's how you're gonna work with more and sometimes get free exposure, whether it's now on their social or media platforms, etc. So you want to make sure that you're doing the right things and they're happy with you, and then, you know, you can go a lot further and sometimes get away with murder, because I mean, they're normally very sticklers in terms of the rules and regulations and stuff. And where you've got a good relationship, they'll come and talk to you and whisper in your ear instead of, you know, sending you a nice little love letter.
Okay. Adolf has asked here, do you personally oversee all your branches? And then he also wants to know, where do you see the growth area going to be in franchising, and what are you doing to sort of manage the process?
Sorry, the first part of that question was?
The first one is, do you actually, on a day-to-day basis,
Oh, yes. I mean, interesting question. Yeah, I mean, obviously, if you've got 1 or 2 stores, normally only you would do that yourself. It's pointless appointing somebody else and paying a salary for that. But once you start getting to the 4-store level, initially, that's when you start thinking, and normally the franchise or brands owners will put that as part of, you've got to then start putting an operational person above the store manager in as well. Because again, 4 stores, you can't be in the 4 stores at the same time every day. And then obviously from managing that and lifestyle point of view, sometimes you pay somebody else to do the daily grind. You still overview in totality, and obviously technology has made things a little bit easier how to manage it. Whether it's the online point of sales system and information where you can see it literally every 5 minutes live, to camera systems where you don't have to be in a store every day to see what's going on. You can do it sometimes remotely. But you have to make a turn now and again, and you've got to, just make sure the staff still feel loved and wanted, but also that they are being watched as well. It's funny thing that if you spend 8 hours a day on your feet in a cash and stock environment, that the lure of helping yourself is always there. That risk, and as soon as detection risk, or they feel the detection risk is very low, that's when they'll start doing things and helping themselves, or collecting a bit of taxi money and things like that. So it's critical that they are aware that you are looking all the time. They just don't know when and where, because that then heightens the detection risk story. I mean, at the end of the day, if your staff are happy, that bubbliness will translate and come across to the customers, which means more sales. You don't have to advertise literally. That's your advertising to bring people back tomorrow and the day after and the day after, again and again. And then, for us, we've got a regional already for a couple of years. So he takes care of that, a lot of the daily grind and going around, and particularly checking and auditing brand standards, because that's critical for us. There is a tool to manage that, and he does that, a full operational audit once a month on every store. They don't know when it happens, so that's to make sure that they do it for all 30 days and not just that one day of the month. So it's critical. He does a lot of that, and checking up on suppliers' cash counts and stock counts and things like that. And then also that goes hand in hand, training of staff as well, because we don't have a separate trainer necessarily. So there's a lot of coaching and training that's got to happen, and then sitting with a manager reviewing, because it's their little business. They've got to run it like that. They're being responsible and held accountable.
I think we've got time for one more question, and I'm sure if somebody wants to personally ask you questions, they can just contact Richard. But if you had to go back, would you do it again? And is there things that you would do different?
Let's start with Wendy.
Wendy.
Yes, I will do it again. I will continue doing this forever, whenever. I don't know when it's gonna stop, but yeah, I think I will continue. I think when you start, it's quite overwhelming, because it's not something that I'm not a chef, or I haven't got accounting or anything. I'm just the average person, so I don't have a background of anything to do in the food industry. But I think the biggest thing is the commitment. If you start, it's 100% or nothing. And yes, I think you have to give 100%, because what you put in is what you're eventually going to get out. So if it's only 50%, you're going to get 50% out. So yeah, commitment.
Yeah, I mean, add to that, I think, the initial month or two that when Wendy started way back then, 2008, I mean, she came home after 6 weeks of when the training was still happening, and after firing the manager and opening and closing the store every day as well. So it was a long day. She came home one evening in tears and said, I don't want to do this anymore. But, from there she's grown, and probably at least 5 years ago, you won't be able to pry it away with a crowbar from her anymore. She still gravitates a little bit to Stellenbosch because that she calls it a baby. And yeah, I mean, will I do it again? I mean, certainly, yeah, I've done my 20-year plus in the corporate environment, and I've learned a lot from that. And I mean, that set me up. But I always, every 5 years, made a call, do I do my own thing now? Because there was always that in the back of my mind, I would like to do my own thing and own instead of making some other brand owner rich. And then obviously the opportunity presented itself 2.5 years ago. And looking back now, I'll do it again and again and again. Just for me, it was easy because there was already an existing business which Wendy was busy with. And it was, how do I add to that ultimately? And obviously with the experience and background, it was quite easy. The initial part was just getting used to working side by side with your wife every day and not now and again trying to kill each other. But I mean, because of the 12 years Wendy has also spent in it, she can look at something and immediately knows where's the issue or where's the problem, etc. But she's well experienced in terms of the industry as well. I'm fortunate, I can just look at the number side and I can immediately spot where problems are and go direct people where to go look. So it's certainly do it again. Obviously, COVID has changed a lot of things in the sense that you've got to actually do a bit of a reset button now and challenge everything from cost structure to how you do it to what's the future growth going to look like and where will it, you got to align with catering for the online and takeaway environment. And then grow. And how do you get this business again back on a good sound footing that it produces some good cash flow again? And then also our plan was always when I joined was to add and maybe get to about a 10 store level. We opened one, we bought one, opened one. We've been working hard to find space in Paarl for the last year and a half, and it's a bit of a difficult one to find the right space there. So there will always be, how do we add more to it? Because it's literally like just plugging another store in. The whole business model and our setup is there. You just plug another one in. It's quick and easy. And then, we don't want to go too big eventually where it really becomes closer to a corporate environment eventually. For us, it's nice lifestyle. We do it for hopefully another 10 or 15 years and have enough money put away that we can retire.
Richard, is there time for one more?
Yeah, there's time.
Piet, sort of ask here, for someone in the industry, does the brand and the brand consistency play a huge role in your opinion? So your brand, and then also during COVID with the lockdown now, have you done marketing for Kauai, for your stores?
Yeah, I mean, brand consistency is critical. It's paramount. I mean, Kauai's now got just over 170 stores in South Africa. So from a customer point of view, they will have more than one store that they touch. And where they're going to find disparities or differences, it's going to, whether it's good or bad, it's always going to then weaken the brand, if I can call it, from a consumer viewpoint. So it's critical that you can have consistency across all 170 or however number of outlets you have. And the only way you do that is that you have proper brand standards and you've got a system and tool of training it and managing, because it's a daily manage. It doesn't just autopilot. So So that's critical, that consistency, quality was, and it's a bit like, you know, Woolies. Woolies didn't day one have the quality viewpoint it has today. It's only over time how they built it out, that quality, consistency experience that customers got. It's the same food industry that you know, whether it's a service or the food quality or whatever, you've got to have that consistency at that high level. I mean, certainly Kauai, there is probably a higher expectation as well than just a deep fried chicken brand. So we've got to make sure that the quality and freshness of our product is better than most.
Okay, Coetsee, thank you very much for that. I think we're out of time. I'm going to give back to Richard so that he can wrap up for us. Thank you so much, and I'll catch you on the mountains.
Or in the street.
Or in the street.
Okay, so thanks again, Hendrik and Wendy. I think that was fascinating. So I just jotted down 5 takeaways from everything that you said there, and please stop me if you think I missed something. So the first one is, I definitely agree with you in terms of you wanting to start a business, you know, and maybe you're not such an entrepreneur with flair, that franchising can be a much more safer route because you're using somebody else's trusted and proven methods. Second takeaway, managing people is never easy, whether it be in corporate life or being an entrepreneur. The third takeaway I got there, that COVID-19 has shown us that things can change in a blink of an eye, and you need to be prepared. And we brought that up in a previous coffee chat with Paula in terms of having a contingency plan. The fourth one I put there is you need to do your homework. So I think it's like anything in life, you know, to be prepared, you need to do your homework. And then the fifth thing is, I think it's true for any business, so that building relationships is always a good thing to do, because you want repeat business. There's a value chain vertically and horizontally that you need to keep the relationships alive with. So I think that's all we have time for today, because we're approaching the hour mark. If there's any additional questions, then please just pop either Alani or myself an email on these email addresses, and we will gladly ask Hendrik and Wendy some of these questions and send them out to you guys. And then, as per usual, I'll be posting the videos later on this afternoon with these takeaways, and it'll be on our YouTube channel. So I haven't mentioned this before, but please subscribe to our YouTube channel. And that's all we have for today. So thanks, guys. We'll see you next week. Oh yeah, sorry, just one last thing for next week. Next week we have a kitchen business in the Johannesburg region who have definitely gone through ups and downs over the last couple of years, and with COVID-19, and come up with some really interesting ideas about how to survive and thrive.